The crisp autumn air hung heavy over Washington, D.C. as thousands of citizens gathered around the Capitol in anticipation of a historic event. It was a day unlike any other, one where the nation braced itself for both celebration and reflection. Amid the sea of American flags and patriotic banners fluttering in the gentle breeze, the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States was about to unfold. The day was a study in contrasts. Jubilant supporters cheered with fervor while others watched in silent apprehension, each face telling a story of hope or heartache. Yet, as the nation looked on, there was one figure whose unexpected words were destined to redefine the moment, and perhaps the future of the country. Outside the hallowed halls of power, excitement pulsed like electricity. Crowds surged around the Capitol, their collective voices merging into a roar of anticipation. Cameras from every major network captured every nuance of the day, from the smiling faces of dignitaries to the solemn eyes of those who had come to witness history in the making. At the heart of this grand ceremony, the Trump family stood united on a raised platform that symbolized strength and continuity amidst the storm of political controversy. Donald Trump, clad in a classic dark suit with an unmistakable air of confidence, delivered his second inaugural address. His booming voice filled the expanse of the National Mall, resonating with promises of bold new beginnings and a vision for the nation that was as assertive as it was optimistic. His words, meticulously crafted and delivered with characteristic bravado, were designed to inspire his base, galvanize his supporters, and affirm the direction he intended to steer the country. Yet, even as his speech reverberated across the assembled multitudes, there was an underlying tension, an awareness that the country he sought to lead was deeply divided. The applause that followed each of his declarations was tempered by the knowledge that reconciliation remained an elusive dream. But just as the echoes of his address began to fade into the collective heartbeat of the nation, an unexpected moment was about to seize the spotlight. A moment that would leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. In the midst of the resounding cheers and thunderous applause, the cameras shifted their focus to the Trump family. Melania Trump stood poised and regal beside her husband, her expression composed and dignified as she surveyed the crowd. Yet, it was her youngest son, Barron Trump, who inadvertently became the center of attention. A young man whose presence was both commanding and surprisingly understated. At 18 years old, Barron had grown into a striking figure. Nearly 7 feet tall, his imposing stature was softened by an inherent reserve, a quiet dignity that set him apart from the bombast often associated with political spectacles. For years, Barron had been content to remain in the background, shielded by his father's larger-than-life persona. But on this day, as the inauguration ceremony reached its crescendo, something changed. As Donald Trump stepped down from the podium, the crowd erupted in a chorus of applause, celebrating the end of the formal address. The camera panned over the jubilant faces of the supporters, capturing every moment of pride and expectation. Yet among the sea of smiles, a subtle shift occurred, a murmur of anticipation, as if the nation sensed that history was about to be made once more. It began quietly at first. Barron, dressed immaculately in a sharp black suit, stood a little apart from the rest of his family. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, scanned the crowd. There was a moment of hesitation, a pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. For a few heartbeats, the clamor of celebration subsided, replaced by a palpable silence. Even his own family appeared momentarily taken aback by his deliberate stillness. Then, as if gathering courage from deep within, Barron stepped forward. With measured steps and an air of quiet resolve, he approached the podium that had once been the exclusive domain of seasoned politicians and commanding orators. The microphones captured the soft sound of his breath as he adjusted his tie, his gaze fixed on the audience. The room, once filled with raucous applause, fell into an expectant hush. "Today is a day that marks not just a new chapter for my father, but for all of us," Barron began, his voice surprisingly steady, yet imbued with an earnest vulnerability that resonated with every listener. The words, simple and unadorned, carried an unexpected weight, a truth that cut through the noise of partisan politics and reached straight into the heart of the nation. The audience leaned in, caught between curiosity and awe. For the first time, the youngest member of the Trump family had chosen to speak. His tone was not that of a polished politician, nor was it the bombast of a seasoned speaker. Instead, it was the measured cadence of a young man who had spent much of his life quietly observing, absorbing, and reflecting on the state of the world around him. "I've spent much of my life watching from the sidelines," he confessed softly, his eyes sweeping across the crowd as if to embrace every soul present. "I've watched heated arguments on television, read about the pain of those who feel unheard, and listened to stories of division and strife from every corner of our nation, and for a long time I stayed silent, believing it wasn't my place to speak." His admission, candid and unassuming, struck a chord with many, especially with those who had long felt marginalized by the cacophony of public discourse. A murmur of understanding rippled through the audience. In that moment, Barron wasn't just the son of a president. He was a representative of a generation burdened by the weight of inherited conflict, yet hopeful for a future built on empathy and understanding. "But staying silent," he continued, his voice growing more resolute, "hasn't solved anything. If anything, it's allowed divisions to grow deeper, to widen the gap between us." His words, measured and sincere, carried a challenge, a call to action for everyone present. "We can disagree on many things, but we must agree on one thing. The future of this country is in our hands, and it's worth fighting for. And that fight starts with listening to each other, to our differences, and to the common ground that unites us." The silence that followed was almost tangible, a collective breath held by an audience suddenly aware of the magnitude of his words. Even the most fervent supporters and the staunchest critics paused, their attention captured by the sincerity in Barron's tone. For a moment, the political stage gave way to a universal truth, that the future was not predetermined by the past, but could be shaped by the choices made in the present. As Barron's gaze swept over the sea of faces, his expression shifted subtly from introspection to quiet determination. "We are all responsible for the state of this nation," he declared, his voice echoing with the clarity of youthful resolve. "Each of us has the power to make it better, not by waiting for someone else to fix the problems, but by starting with ourselves." His words were simple yet profound, challenging every listener to reflect on their own role in the larger tapestry of national destiny. For many in the audience, his message was a revelation. Gone were the empty slogans and divisive rhetoric. In their place was an appeal to personal responsibility, a call to look inward, to acknowledge one's own biases, and to work together for a common good. "We have let anger and fear define us for too long," Barron said, his voice softening as he spoke of wounds that had festered over years of polarization. "It's time to set aside the noise, to listen instead of shouting, to bridge the divides that threaten to tear us apart." The impact of his words was immediate and profound. Across the crowd, faces that had been etched with skepticism began to soften, as if the truth of his message was washing away years of cynicism. His call for unity was not a naive plea for everyone to agree. It was a realistic, heartfelt appeal to find common ground despite differences, a recognition that while disagreement was inevitable, it need not be destructive. At the very moment when his words hung in the air, Barron paused and looked back at his family. In that brief glance, a silent exchange of pride, love, and shared responsibility was evident. It was as if in that fleeting moment, the entire Trump legacy was being reimagined, not as a monolith of political power, but as a family and a nation capable of growth, empathy, and renewal. Then, with a measured finality, Barron closed his remarks with a plea that would resonate long after the ceremony ended. If my generation is to inherit this country, I ask only one thing. Let us inherit a country we can be proud of, a country built on hope, understanding, and the courage to change for the better. His words were delivered with a calm intensity that belied the gravity of the moment. As he stepped away from the podium, an almost eerie silence followed, one that seemed to capture the collective processing of his message. Then, slowly and steadily, the crowd erupted into applause. Unlike the raucous cheers of political rallies, this was a measured, thoughtful ovation, as if each clap was a personal promise to carry his words forward into their daily lives. The impact of Barron Trump's speech was immediate and far-reaching. Within hours, social media platforms were ablaze with videos and clips of his address. Hashtags such as Voice of Unity, Inherit Pride, and Barron Trump's speech began trending globally, sparking discussions among citizens of all ages. On Twitter, users dissected his every word, while on TikTok, young people embraced his message by launching challenges that encouraged acts of kindness and community dialogue. News outlets picked up the story with a mix of surprise and admiration. Cable news segments, once focused solely on the spectacle of the inauguration, now devoted hours to analyzing Barron's unexpected address. Interviews with political analysts revealed a consensus. While many expected the day to be dominated by his father's forceful rhetoric, it was Barron's quiet sincerity that had captured the nation's imagination. Headlines such as Barron Trump, the voice of a new generation, and A Moment of Unity, Barron's call to build a better America, appeared in print and online, fueling debates that transcended party lines. Reactions were as diverse as they were passionate. Conservative commentators, traditionally skeptical of any divergence from the family's established narrative, found themselves reluctantly admiring the maturity in Barron's tone. It's refreshing to hear a message that isn't laced with the usual partisan rhetoric, one commentator noted in a televised segment. Liberal pundits, on the other hand, recognized the potential for his words to bridge divides, even as they debated whether his privileged background could ever allow him to fully understand the struggles faced by everyday Americans. Across social media, younger viewers were especially moved. High school and college students posted reflective videos and essays, drawing parallels between Barron's call for unity and their own hopes for a less divided future. I used to think politics was all about fighting and shouting, one student wrote in a viral tweet, but today I learned that real change starts with listening and understanding. In classrooms and community centers, discussions emerged about the importance of empathy, of engaging in meaningful conversations rather than succumbing to the bitterness of division. Yet, not everyone was convinced. Critics pointed to Barron's background, arguing that a man raised in privilege could never fully grasp the hardships of ordinary Americans. Some political analysts questioned whether his words were a genuine expression of personal conviction or a carefully crafted moment designed to soften the Trump legacy. Even within the Trump family, opinions were mixed. While Melania and some siblings expressed pride and hope, others worried about the long-term implications of exposing the family to such public scrutiny. Nevertheless, despite the varied opinions, one thing was undeniable. Barron's speech had ignited a national conversation, a conversation that reached far beyond the confines of the inauguration ceremony and into the hearts and minds of everyday citizens. In the days and weeks following the inauguration, the ripple effects of Barron Trump's unexpected address continued to unfold in surprising ways. Grassroots movements emerged, inspired by his call for unity and self-responsibility. In San Diego, a group of high school students organized community forums where people from different political backgrounds gathered to share their experiences and work on local solutions to shared problems. These gatherings, often held in community centers and local coffee shops, were marked by open dialogue where even the most polarized opinions were set aside in favor of finding common ground. In Cincinnati, an initiative known as Common Ground began to take shape. Its founders, inspired by Barron's words, believed that healing the nation's divisions started with individual conversations by listening and learning from one another, no matter how different their viewpoints might be. Weekly meetings were organized in libraries and small town halls, where participants shared personal stories and explored ways to support one another in times of crisis. The movement, though modest in scale, rapidly gained momentum as more people recognized that the call for unity was not merely symbolic, but actionable. Social media played a significant role in amplifying this message. A viral hashtag, #InheritPride, encouraged users to share stories of how they were taking personal steps toward creating a more inclusive community, whether by volunteering at local charities, engaging in intergenerational dialogues, or simply listening more closely to the concerns of others. Videos and posts flooded platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, each piece contributing to a tapestry of hope and collective action. Influential voices in both politics and entertainment began to echo these sentiments, reinforcing the idea that every individual, regardless of their background, had a role to play in shaping the future of the nation. Universities and think tanks also took notice. A series of public lectures and panel discussions centered around the theme of unity and responsibility were organized, drawing speakers from diverse fields, including ethics, political science, and technology. Many referenced Barron's speech as a turning point, an inflection point that challenged established norms and prompted deeper reflection on the nature of leadership and the power of youth in shaping public discourse. For some, his message was a clarion call to reject cynicism and embrace the possibility that change begins with each of us. Within the corridors of government and policy-making, the speech sparked its own dialogue. Lawmakers and advisors who had long been entrenched in partisan debates found themselves considering more inclusive approaches to addressing national challenges. Although major legislative reforms were not immediately forthcoming, the conversation had shifted in subtle yet important ways. The emphasis moved from adversarial politics to a search for common purpose, a recognition that the future of the country depended on its ability to heal divisions rather than deepen them. For Barron Trump himself, the experience of speaking on the national stage was transformative. While his life had been largely defined by the towering legacy of his family, that moment at the podium allowed him to assert his own identity, a quiet declaration that he was more than just the son of a controversial figure. Friends and teachers from his past recalled a young man who had always been introspective, someone who preferred to listen rather than speak out, yet those same voices also remembered his thoughtful insights when he did choose to contribute, hints of a wisdom that belied his years. In private moments following the inauguration, Barron spent time reflecting on the weight of his words. He understood that his message, though gentle and unassuming, carried an enormous responsibility. It was not enough to simply speak about unity, one had to live it. In conversations with close friends and trusted mentors, he explored the complexities of what it meant to bridge divides in a country that was increasingly polarized. He read voraciously on topics ranging from political philosophy to social psychology, seeking to understand how empathy could be cultivated in a society riven by mistrust. Over time, those reflections led to a subtle but meaningful shift in how he engaged with the world. No longer content to remain in the background, Barron began to participate more actively in public debates and community initiatives, always mindful of the lessons he had learned. His future, once overshadowed by the weight of his family name, began to take on a new shape, a legacy built not solely on inherited power, but on a personal commitment to fostering understanding and cooperation. His speech had sparked not just national conversations, but also personal growth. In interviews, peers from his days at school and college recalled that he had grown more confident and assertive, yet remained humble. "He's always been reflective," one friend noted, but after that day, you could see that he had found his voice. Not to override others, but to listen and connect. His journey, both public and personal, became a testament to the power of vulnerability. The idea that true strength lies not in silencing our doubts, but in sharing them, in inviting dialogue rather than fostering division. As the nation moved forward from that historic day, the legacy of Barron Trump's unexpected speech continued to influence discussions on unity and progress. His call for individual responsibility, this simple yet radical notion that change starts with each of us, remained at the forefront of public discourse. The message that unity is not achieved by waiting for someone else to fix our problems, but by taking the initiative to build a better future, resonated deeply in a society that was all too familiar with the corrosive effects of division. In communities across America, initiatives inspired by his words began to materialize. Local leaders and educators organized forums and town hall meetings, bringing together individuals from divergent political and social backgrounds to engage in honest conversations about their shared future. Many found that, despite their differences, the common desire to create a society marked by compassion and mutual respect was a powerful force, a force capable of overcoming the bitterness of past conflicts. Organizations that had long been dedicated to bridging societal divides embraced Barron's message as a guiding principle. Nonprofits, community groups, and even corporations began to implement programs that emphasized active listening, empathy training, and community service. The idea was simple. By working together on local projects, whether it was cleaning up neighborhoods, organizing cultural events, or volunteering at food banks, people could rediscover the value of collaboration and shared purpose. Slowly, these initiatives began to chip away at the walls of division, one conversation at a time. On the national stage, political commentators and thought leaders took note of the shifting narrative. In editorials and op-ed pieces, writers argued that true leadership requires not just bold rhetoric, but a willingness to engage with dissent and build bridges across ideological divides. They pointed out that while political power could be won and lost in the heat of campaign battles, the real measure of a nation's strength lay in its ability to evolve through thoughtful discourse, empathy, and a commitment to shared responsibility. As months turned into years, the memory of that day, of Barron Trump stepping forward and speaking from the heart, remained a touchstone for many. The viral videos, the trending hashtags, and the widespread discussions all served as constant reminders of a moment when a young man dared to challenge the status quo and call for unity in a divided nation. His speech was studied in classrooms, cited in political debates, and even served as inspiration for artists and musicians who sought to capture the spirit of hope and renewal. For some, it was a transformative experience, a moment that reaffirmed their belief in the possibility of change. For others, it was a bittersweet reminder that while words have the power to inspire, true progress demands action. And yet, as the nation continued to grapple with its challenges, the message remained clear. Change begins with each of us. The power to shape the future does not reside solely in the hands of leaders or celebrities. It is a collective endeavor, one that requires every individual to step forward, listen, and work together. In the halls of government, new initiatives and bipartisan efforts were quietly set in motion, inspired in part by the spirit of unity that Barron's words had invoked. While sweeping legislative reforms remained elusive, there was a growing recognition that healing the nation's deep-seated divisions required more than rhetoric. It demanded the active participation of every citizen. In a world where the loudest voices often drown out the whispers of reason, Barron Trump's message was a call to remember that every voice matters. It was a reminder that while technology, media, and politics might shape our landscape, it is the simple act of connection, the decision to listen, understand, and empathize, that ultimately defines us. His speech was not a panacea for all of America's ills, but it was a starting point, a spark that, if nurtured, could kindle a flame of genuine change. As the sun set on yet another day in the nation, the legacy of that unexpected speech lived on in quiet yet enduring ways. It was a legacy not defined by political triumphs or scandalous headlines, but by the real and lasting impact it had on individual lives. From the small towns of America to the bustling streets of major cities, people began to re-examine their own actions, asking themselves how they could contribute to a culture of understanding rather than division. In living rooms, over dinner tables, and in the quiet corners of cafes, conversations sparked by Barron's words led to small but significant changes. Neighbors who had once been strangers began to share their stories. In schools, teachers used his speech as a launchpad for lessons on empathy, responsibility, and the power of dialogue. And on social media, a new narrative took shape, one that celebrated not only the brilliance of technological innovation, but the equally vital human capacity for compassion. Barron Trump's unexpected address at his father's inauguration may have been a brief moment in time, but its impact was far-reaching and profound. It was a moment when a young man chose to speak out, not as a symbol of his family's political might, but as an individual with a clear, heartfelt vision for a better future. His words reminded everyone that the journey toward unity and progress begins with the courage to step forward and speak the truth, even when it is not the easiest path. Now, as the nation continues to navigate an era marked by uncertainty and division, Barron's call to action resonates louder than ever. We are all responsible for the state of this nation. Let us inherit a country we can be proud of, a country built on hope, understanding, and the courage to change. These words challenge each one of us to take a step, no matter how small, toward building bridges, to listen instead of shouting, and to remember that real change begins with personal responsibility. So, as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, what can I do to make a difference? In your community, with your family, at work, every small act of kindness and every moment of genuine connection adds up. It is through these daily actions that we collectively forge a future that honors the promise of unity and leaves behind a legacy of compassion. If you found this story compelling, let it inspire you to share your own voice and take action. Whether you join a local initiative, engage in heartfelt discussions, or simply make a conscious effort to listen more deeply to those around you, remember that progress is built one step at a time. The journey toward a united, better country begins with you. Thank you for reading this extended narrative, a story that transforms a moment of unexpected vulnerability into a timeless call for unity and change. May Barron Trump's words serve as a reminder that each of us holds the power to shape our future, one thoughtful act at a time. If you believe in the power of hope and unity, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire reflection, action, and a commitment to building a better tomorrow.